Hey guys, it's Danny. Well, look at that. It is the end of the month, almost September now. So you know what that means. It is time to recap the orchids we had in bloom in August. But before we go ahead and do that, let's see who actually won last month's Orchid of the Month. And look at that. The Phalaenopsis bellina was your top choice. It received the most votes from you guys, and I'm not surprised. It is a beautiful orchid, one of my favorites. It is very fragrant, it looks very nice, and if you love Phalaenopsis orchids, I absolutely encourage you to have this one in your collection as well, because not only does it look beautiful, but it's also a summer blooming one, so you will enjoy it when the other ones are growing vegetatively. Also, don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it, and why not subscribe? It is free and I post 3 times a week. On with the orchids, I say. So we are actually going to start with the Phalaenopsis, and here we have the Phalaenopsis bronze maiden. I was pretty surprised this one bloomed because I was expecting it to not actually be a summer bloomer, and I'm still not convinced it is. It is the first season where I have it in bloom, so I will not put a stamp on it, but what I will assure you is that it is absolutely gorgeous, and better than how it looks like, it's the fragrance. It smells powerful and beautiful. It's a very floral scent, and if you're not into scents, just look at that foliage. It has a natural mottling or pattern on the leaves. This is coming from the Schilleriana, which is one of her parents, and the Schilleriana is the reason why I'm saying that I don't think it's a summer bloomer. It just happened that it produced another flower spike because her first flower spike was not so successful due to thrips. Anyway, I'm very happy to see it in bloom, and again, definitely a recommendation if you absolutely love Phalaenopsis orchids. Next up, we have Phalaenopsis Ba-Shi Redsun with another bloom. This is a summer bloomer orchid, and it looks quite a lot like the bellina minus the intense colors. It does have a little bit of a fragrance as well, and this is the orchid that is actually prone to having a lot of anthocyanin on its leaves. So the leaves are naturally a little bit darker, which might be more interesting to you. Other than that though, the orchid is pretty subtle. It has a really pale color. I personally like it, but I can see how it's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. Anyway, very mild scent, very subtle orchid. If you're into that, she's great. Next up, here we have Phalaenopsis YangYang Blueberry, which is the total opposite. You're gonna see I'm gonna alternate these orchids. This one is intensely fragrant. It smells beautiful, reminds me a lot of the Violacea, and is the reason why I didn't burst out the door and buy myself another Violacea, metaphorically speaking. This one takes its place beautifully. The color you see, I'm sad to say, is not very realistic. I cannot really capture the proper color of this orchid, which is a muted or dusty mauvey color. It is beautiful. I've never seen this type of color on an orchid. Combined with the fragrance, it is a must-have. And because the Phalaenopsis tetraspis is one of her parents, take a look at that fuzzy lip. It's beautiful. What it didn't inherit, though, is the color alternation on the petals. But that's okay. She's beautiful as it is, and I love that little dot of yellow on the lip. Next up, here we have the Phalaenopsis Yuda Blood Red, and it is indeed a red Phalaenopsis. However, it's not super red. It's more of a purpley type of red, cherry type of red, and it's also not a solid color. You can see it has a little bit of a pattern on the petals. That being said, I do really love the shape of the flowers. It's not your typical star shape, I guess you would call it, bellina type of shape, which is a nice change. Other than that, this orchid is not super fragrant. It is pretty mildly fruity scented. So if you're more into those types of scents, this is really beautiful, but other than that, it doesn't really stand out. I was under the impression that the color would be a lot more vibrant on this one. It's not necessarily a disappointment. I was just imagining something else. It is beautiful, but I don't see it being on the top of your list. Maybe you're gonna prove me wrong. And then there she is, the Phalaenopsis bellina. This year she likes to have 2 flowers in bloom at a time, and I don't mind it. She is so fragrant, which might be an issue for some of you. For me, it's not. I adore fragrance, and the scent is very fruity and fresh, I find, on the bellina. So it's really easy to like, even if you're not into scents. What more can I say? She's my favorite, I think, summer bloomer. I really like this Ponkan variety. The colors are very vivid. The fragrance is beautiful. The leaves are nice and glossy, like most summer bloomer Phalaenopsis are. And yeah, she's my favorite too. Oh, but look at that! Another one of my favorites. This is the Phalaenopsis tetraspis C1. This is the orchid responsible for the alternating petals in terms of colors when it comes to the fly eagle. So as you can see, all of the flowers are just a little bit different. The petals are not identical. You can have either full red flowers, full white flowers, or a combination of these colors on the petals. What will the flowers look like? It's always a surprise. I love this aspect of this orchid. It's not very fragrant, sadly. It has a sort of a fruity scent, but it's very mild, and it has that really cute fuzzy lip. I have been trying to grow this orchid for ages now. It's not necessarily an easygoing orchid, I find. Maybe I just had bad luck with some bad specimens, but the flowers are definitely worth the trouble. I wouldn't purchase this orchid for any other reason other than to experience that mystery and joy of how will the flowers look like. And as a side note, I don't find that temperature, light, fertilizer, any of these factors play a role in how the flowers will look like. There is speculation that light has something to do with it. I don't find it to be true, never did. So I don't know what makes the flowers more red or more white. I guess it's genetic to some degree. So yeah, it's always a surprise when it blooms. Next up, here we have my Miltonia NoID Yellow. I still haven't been able to find an ID for this orchid, and I love it to bits. Sadly though, it is not a very vigorous hybrid at all. It is growing, it's okay, but if I compare it to other Miltonias, oh boy, it's on the level of the Nelly pretty much. But it's still going, so I'm happy about that. The flowers are not fragrant, but they have this beautiful golden color, and the lip is white as snow, which makes it very hard to actually identify. I don't know of any Miltonia that has a pure white lip. It could be a genetic glitch, it could be a hybrid that is well known, but actually looks a little bit different than mine, and that white lip really throws me off. I love this orchid. It would be a shame to lose it, but I'm telling you, it's not a very vigorous hybrid quite at all, and I'm going through shoots and hoops to make her happy. She's okay, she's just not excelling. Probably never will, but as long as I can maintain her on the survival line, everything is okay. Next up, here is an orchid that I received from one of you guys, and it is not a zygopetalum, it is indeed a Miltonia, and I do believe it is the Honolulu, which is a Morelliana hybrid. The flowers look very similar to the Morelliana, but you can see it's not a pure breed. That sounds very bad. It's not a pure Spectabilis Morelliana. It is much taller, has a tendency to become pretty bushy and a pretty big plant actually. It is quite vigorous, I find, and the flowers are large and they don't have the shape of a pure Spectabilis. So my best guess is that this is the Honolulu. It is not fragrant, but that color is absolutely beautiful. And you know me, I'm not a fan of purple. I like this particular shade though. Next up, here we have an orchid everybody says looks like frogs. I don't see it. Maybe I didn't see enough frogs in my life, but this is the Bracidostele Gilded Tower Mystic Maze. This is the current name. It has been called many different ways in the past, but it is an orchid that everybody wants to have in their collection. And it's one of those that actually looks better in reality. I'm looking at the footage and it looks pretty nice, but in reality it's even better. So I found this one at a local flower shop. It appears here in Europe from time to time in flower shops, no problems. And it's quite vigorous, I find. It is easy to recover, rejuvenate. If you remember, I did purchase quite a lot of Oncidium types last year. Well, this is one that is doing pretty great, gives me no headaches. And I do recommend it if you like these Bracidostele hybrids with these spidery flowers. And of course, if you like frogs and you happen to see a frog in this flower, definitely give it a try. Remaining in the realm of the Oncidiums, here's a NoID Red that I actually saved from last year. Look at those flowers, I love them. And no, it is not a wildcat, as you might guess. It looks quite different. The flowers are absolutely different. They're much bigger. The flower spike is much longer, much branchier. The flowering is not so compact. It is actually very, very, very different than the typical wildcat, and if you see it in reality, it is quite a lot more obvious. I don't actually know what it is. I think it's a former Colmanara, but I'm just gonna call it Oncidium because probably a changed name. It has no fragrance, nothing perfumey in any case, and the flower spike is really long, really branchy. It is the first blooming after it recovered, so I'm guessing next bloomings will be even better. You can see it's not very compact, it's not very bushy, but the flowers are absolutely fantastic. I love the variation of red from the petals to the lip. Do you see that the lip is a little brighter or a little lighter in color? I really, really love this contrast. Next, oh, you'll never guess, here's the Nelly. Ta-da! I managed to bloom it. And as you can tell, the blooms are very tessellated. This orchid actually has different types of blooms depending on temperature. In the summertime and in warm temperatures, it tends to have these tessellated flowers, which I will admit, not my favorites. I love the full red flowers that it produces in the winter time. Those are the ideal flowers for me. Bonus, it is very fragrant. To me, it smells like lemons, but I did hear some people who detected something else altogether. It is not everybody's cup of tea, this fragrance, and I can see that. It can be perceived as chemically to some extent. I personally like it though, so hooray for me, but I know how it feels like to not detect what other people detect, and that kind of sucks. But anyway, this is my favorite orchid, and my logo is actually based on it, although it doesn't look that way, right? It is very, very tessellated, and the orchid herself is very finicky, very fussy. I would not recommend it to any beginner, especially if you live in warm environments. But yeah, what to do? I really, really love this orchid. It is such a beautiful red in the winter time that I just cannot say no to growing it. Next, here we have the Prosthechea vitellina, which used to be called Encyclia, but hey, reclassification is the name of the game in the orchid world. This orchid has one of the most beautiful orange colors ever, and I do mean ever. It is so, so, so intense. And this year I really do like the flower spike it produced. This one is supposed to be a cooler grower. I don't find it to be. She does absolutely fantastic in my environment. She enjoys the bright light, enjoys the warm temperatures. I do believe I had her more in bloom in summertime than in winter. It's not fragrant, but look at those leaves. They are glaucous. They have this blue sheen to them, which if you touch them a little bit more abruptly, you will remove from the leaves. So I would not suggest you touch the leaves way too much, but the flowers, it's for your real estate. By the way, from time to time I do get comments asking if there is any issue. If you touch the flowers, will you make them fade, or will the oils on your hands affect the petals? And the answer is absolutely not. Your hands do not have enough oils to actually cause any type of damage, unless you actually do have oil on your hands. Maybe you ate something oily with your hands. Other than that, I suggest you not worry. Nothing will happen if you touch the leaves or the flowers on most orchids, but these ones that have this blue sheen, yes, you can definitely scrub it off if you insist with your hand. Next up, another orange orchid, but can you see it's a different shade of orange? This one is beautiful as well, don't get me wrong, but the vitellina is just so intense. So this is the Procatavola golden peacock, which is just the perfect cattleya hybrid, intergeneric, whatever you want to call it. It blooms as many times a year as you can think of, pretty much. It grows really fast, and each pseudobulb will actually create flowers, which develop super fast. It doesn't actually create those type of sheets that you need to wait around for. No, it's gonna bloom. If it's healthy and you treat it just like any other cattleya, it will bloom. If you have warm temperatures pretty much all the time, it will bloom 5 times a year. Maybe 6 or 7, depending how many direction of growth it has. So that's why I'm saying, however many times a year you can imagine, this orchid can actually bloom. It has the potential to bloom, depends on the size. It is such an easy grower, has my stamp of approval, even if you're a beginner. If you follow a few cattleya rules, you're not gonna go wrong with this one. It can have a slight fragrance in the nighttime, but not all the time, I discovered. So I wouldn't call it very perfumey. Next up, oh boy, my favorite Brassavola. Here we have the Brassavola cucullata. It is not the same one that I had many years ago, 7 years ago, or however many years ago it was. It is a different one that I received a few years back. It grew, it developed, and here we go. It has a flower and it has a few more buds on the way. Now, I absolutely love the shape and how this orchid grows generally, but what I love the most is the fragrance. I find it to be the most fragrant Brassavola out of all of them. Be warned though, I see on the internet that many people consider the cucullata the worst smelling of all. So again, it has to do with some compounds that probably some people detect in a certain way than other people. I detect beautifulness on this one, and it is indeed very intensely scented during nighttime. Currently I have it in the house, and oh boy, it fills up the living room, but I absolutely love it. My boyfriend, not so much. He's not such a huge fan of the scent of this one. So that's why I'm saying, take this with a grain of salt. Some of you will love the fragrance, some of you will not. Are you willing to take the risk? That's up to you, but you have to agree the looks are really wild. I love this orchid. Plus it's pendant, and I like everything pendant. Alrighty, not many more orchids to go, I promise. Here we have a Tolumnia. I don't know what this Tolumnia is. It's a NoID pink type of Tolumnia. It bloomed before, I think in spring, and it had much more pink or purple flowers. Now it's a pale pink. It's a color changer, and I noticed this with many Tolumnia hybrids. They can bloom in a certain way and then create a secondary spike on the very same main spike, which will have totally different blooms. And I mean totally different. I had an orange one that created completely yellow, like golden yellow flowers on the secondary branch at the same time with the orange ones. So with Tolumnias, you never know what you're gonna get. Sometimes they will not switch their colors way too much, but sometimes they will. Finding an ID for this one is very tricky. I'd rather not. It's just a no ID pink Tolumnia, which is really pretty, not fragrant at all. Then we have the Dendrobium Hibiki, which I just purchased, and it actually arrived with these buds, which opened. And isn't that interesting? This type of Dendrobium tends to bloom in clumps or bunches. I like to call them bunches. It's not a fragrant orchid, but you can imagine if the orchid has multiple of these inflorescences, it looks spectacular. And if you Google some pictures on the internet, you'll see what I mean. So it's not fragrant. I didn't purchase it for this reason. I purchased it for how it looks like. I also really do enjoy the orchid herself. It has really glossy leaves. And so far so good. I don't have much experience with it, but It doesn't seem to want to give me any headaches, which is great. I also see another bud forming on another cane, and I do sure hope that all of these canes that you see will create flowers, because if they do, this orchid will look spectacular, like a sort of Christmas tree in orchid terms. Does that make sense? I don't know. It's beautiful. Next, here we have a Vendacious orchid. This is the Rhynchorides Bangkok Sunset, which produced the best flower spike of her life. And I have this orchid for 7 years already. Problem is, we just had some really bad winds all of a sudden one day, which of course managed to destroy quite a few of my orchids. Some of them had buds, some of them were in bloom, this one as well. And even though this one didn't fall because it's kept hanging, the winds, which were super hot, affected the blooms, and one day it was perfectly in full bloom and beautiful, and the next day some of the blooms were just shriveled and it did not look good. So I didn't manage to film it when the blooms, all of them, looked great. But here she is, the Rhynchorides Bangkok Sunset. It is one of my crown jewels. It is very beautifully fragrant, not very strong, but the smell is really flowery, really springy in my opinion, and the colors are those of a sunset, wouldn't you say? And the last orchid we're gonna see today is the Coelogyne usitana in bloom again. It is not the very same flower spike. I told you I have another growth on the other side. The initial flower spike dried, and I'm not surprised, this orchid is actually recovering. So this is the second flower spike and this is the first bloom. I'm hoping to get quite a few more blooms on this flower spike since this orchid is sequential, but I'm so happy to have it in bloom again because I really do love the flowers. I love the contrast of the very dark lip, which in this video doesn't look so dark, but in reality it really is a very dark leathery brown. It's really interesting, and those buttery white petals make for such a beautiful contrast. She is not fragrant, sadly, but if you have a usitana with multiple directions of growth and quite a few spent blooms, you're gonna have zigzaggy flower spikes. Just Google some pictures, you'll see what I mean. I cannot wait to reach that point because that to me looks so whimsical, so nice. Pretty much the reason why I purchased it, but it's going to be a long journey for me. So far so good though. I managed to recover this orchid. She has very sensitive leaves for me. They also don't like bright light. I moved her location. As you can see, the leaves are very pale, and this is because I had her directly on my south window. Oh, she didn't like that. Not at all. So I put her in a pretty shady location now, so the leaves should return to normal. But yeah, she's not in the toppest condition, but she's blooming. And that's about it for this month. I do actually have a few more orchids which are in full bloom, but I'm going to feature them next month because it's already a long video. I feel like it's going to be close to half an hour at this point, so it's okay. I'm going to present the other orchids next month. I think at some point we will reach quite lengthy videos in this Orchids in Bloom series, but it's okay. I will definitely adjust the amount of blabbing I do and try to keep the episodes to the 30 minutes mark. No more than 30 minutes, no matter how many orchids we have. Alrighty, so don't forget to vote for your favorite one down below in the description following the straw poll link, and I will announce the winning orchid next month. Hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with me and seeing all of these orchids, and I hope some of them made your wish list. If they did, let me know in a comment which ones and which one did you vote for so that I can feature you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great weekend. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!